Welcome to New England Ski Journal's Basecamp Podcast, presented by Country Ski and Sport. Ski season is here, and it's time to gear up at Country Ski and Sport. Shop now for your best preseason deals at any of their 3 locations in Hanson, Quincy, and Westwood, Mass. Or shop online at countryski.com.
Hey, everybody, and welcome into the New England Ski Journal's Basecamp Podcast. I am your host, Eric Wilbur, and I am, joined in studio by my co-host, the great Mike Specian, who has returned to us from his knee surgery last month. Michael, welcome back to the show. Well, not welcome back to the show, but welcome back to the studio.
Eric, it's good to be back in here. It's good to be out of the house. It's good to be able to go upstairs and downstairs.
What have you been watching on TV? Have you caught any Netflix series or stuck watching old ski movies?
Absolutely nothing on TV.
Reading
books,
song.
But I've had a lot of work to get done. It's ski season. It's selling season for retailers. And, there's been no downtime. It's just been, I've been home.
It's great to have you back. I'm glad to hear you're feeling better. Are you still looking for March to be back on the hill?
Nope, this month.
This month? Wow, that is incredible. Okay.
I could go right now, Eric. The problem is, I just want to make sure everything's all set.
Yeah. Well, modern medicine. I mean, applause for that, right?
Modern medicine. I can tell you, I know everybody's, so many of the listeners have had ACLs, MCLs, full knees. It's not fun. My wife asked me if I would do the other one if I had to do it right now. I go, no, I'll wait a little bit.
Unreal. Well, we're glad to have you back. And we are going full steam in here, as Tom Werner would say, full steam ahead. Into our next guest is going to be Kristen Ulmer, which is like landing a great big fish. She is the expert. Well, I don't know if she want to be called an expert, but she has built a career or a second career around discussing fear and addressing, sort of looking into yourself to find answers and not to, how to deal with anxiety. And it's funny to take her earlier career as a, big mountain skier, and now she's considered, quote unquote, the expert on fear. And how she got to that stage is truly fascinating. I'm looking forward to speaking with her.
It is fascinating. All of us have been on the ski hill at one point or another, whether you're a beginner, whether you're an intermediate or an advanced skier, have been on the hill going, oh my goodness, I can't do this. Mm-hmm. You look at your first trip up Tuckerman's is a great example. You climb up the left gully, and you're standing there, and you don't want to make the first turn, because if you fall, it's going to hurt, and it's so steep that you don't know if you can. And I think what is tremendous about Kristen is that she took a step back. She left skiing in reality and started to figure out what made her tick first, which is true in all of us.
I was obviously, grew up watching her as part of the North Face Extreme team in all the Warren Miller movies. But I was lucky enough in 2019 to be at her induction into the Ski Hall of Fame. And I was really, I haven't read her book yet, but I'd like to. That's kind of next on my list now that I'm talking more about this and thinking more about it, because look, whether you like it or not, whether you think so or not, you've got the fear, you've got anxiety. It's something we universally deal with. And I think that, in a time and an age where mental health and mental, problems in this country are so prevalent, that facing our fears and addressing our fears and really kind of coming to grips with them, would help us personally and, to be quite honest, as a society. But that's a big task.
Yeah. I think for this podcast, I think what I hope to get out of this is for each person that gets out in nature, whether it be surfing, whether it be whitewater paddling, or whether it be skiing, I hope people myself included, can take something special out of this, of how to deal or how to make that next step to keep ourselves safe, first off, to push our envelope of sorts, and lastly, to make our experience in the skiing world more enjoyable.
All right. That's absolutely true. All of that. We're going to have Kristen Ulmer up next on the Basecamp podcast. Stay tuned. She'll be up right after this.
Looking for expert ski, snowboard, and boot fitting advice? Stop into one of Country Ski and Sport's 3 locations in Quincy, Westwood, or Hanson, Mass. As a third-generation family business, Country Ski has provided Boston area skiers with the best service and discounts in the area for over 50 years. Whether you are brand new to the sport or a seasoned veteran, Country Ski has the equipment and accessories for all ability levels. Don't forget to ask about their popular season lease program, which helps families eliminate the growing pains of purchasing new equipment every year as kids grow. And don't forget, any child 18 years or younger receives a free season pass to Saddleback Mountain with each lease from Country Ski. Visit countryski.com for all the latest information or to shop online.
The Button Ski Hanger is a patented ski storage fixture that safely stores alpine skis regardless of length, width, or shape. This means that your fat powder skis can now be stored next to your narrower carving skis, your race skis, and your kid skis. For more information, visit their website, buttonskirack.com. The Button Ski Hanger is also available for purchase at amazon.com. So make your purchase today. The Button Ski Hanger is simply better for your skis.
At 4,237 feet, Sugarloaf is one of the largest ski areas in the East and second highest peak in the state of Maine, trailing only Mount Katahdin. Boasting over 1,300 acres of open terrain and a vertical drop of nearly 3,000 feet, Sugarloaf offers a wide variety of terrain for all ability levels. A historic winter is ahead with the debut of West Mountain. It's the largest terrain expansion in the Northeast since the late 1970s, adding 12 new beginner and intermediate trails, 88,000 feet of snowmaking pipe, and 246 HKD snowmaking guns. Sugarloaf is a destination not to be missed. Stay slopeside and plan your trip today at sugarloaf.com. All right, welcome back into the Basecamp podcast. We're pleased to welcome on the line here a legend in skiing, the Hall of Famer Kristen Ulmer, who grew up in Henniker, New Hampshire, went on to an extreme racing career, and now, not extreme racing, extreme skiing career, and now is the expert in discussing fear. Kristen Ulmer, welcome to the show.
Howdy. Great to be here.
Hey, Kristen, we are extremely excited to have you on. I just saw, oh goodness, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, a piece on WMUR on Chronicle, and it was like, oh my God, we need Kristen on this show.
Happy to be here. I'm in Las Vegas, thus the background.
Can you tell us a little bit about the background? For those of us who are listening on the traditional form of the podcast, well, you got to go to our, this is how we get the YouTube viewers, you see. You've got to go to our YouTube channel, just search New England Ski Journal on YouTube, and you can see Kristen Ulmer's glorious background, which she's going to describe to us right now.
I'm in a suite in a hotel called the Cosmopolitan, and it's a woman's naked back. And I'm sitting in front of it. It felt appropriate somehow.
It's very nice.
Best background in the room.
Well, welcome to the show, and those of us who are new to the show, to just realizing that you've stumbled upon this because of the background, welcome to you as well.
Hey, Kristen, you're a New England girl, right?
Oh yeah, I'm from Henniker, New Hampshire.
All right, Pat's Peak. We love Pat's. We love what Pat's does for New England and what they gave us in you.
Oh, well, that's sweet.
This was in the weirdest time in 2019. Amy Patton wrote it. Yes, of course, she learned to ski at Pat's Peak. She skied in jeans and didn't wear a hat. I sent this to you to kind of preview our conversation, and you said not true, that you did wear a hat. So we've already got a little bit of controversy right out of the gate. So can you settle this for us? Like, was there a hat or was there no hat? This is obviously pre-helmet days.
I don't think I wore goggles. I'm fairly certain of that.
Right.
And I did ski in jeans until I was 23 years old.
Me too, Kristen.
Oh, actually, no, let me take that back. I got that wrong. I skied in jeans until I was 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And that included my first season skiing at Snowbird in a deep, a lot of powder. And finally, my boyfriend at the time, I crashed and I had so much snow down the back of my jeans and he was scooping it out and I'm crying because it burned and because it was so cold. And he said, that's it. I'm not going skiing with you anymore unless you get a pair of ski pants. So I bought a $40 pair of ski pants. And then I skied in those. And then after that, I was sponsored.
made it easy.
Not bad.
But not by Levi or Lee.
By what? No, definitely not.
Yeah. Well, you made it to Squaw in 1989. Can you give us a quick view of going to Squaw and how that sort of created your career?
In the early days of my ski career, I was competing in moguls, and I was doing that with no goals or intention. Mostly I was just wanting to hang out with my friends and go on cool road trips. And, but I took last place in mogul competitions, but so I wasn't a very good mogul skier, but I was really good in the air. And I thought that I could use my powers of conviction to talk this guy, Eric Perlman, who was filming what was then called the North Face Extreme Skiing video series, into auditioning my skiing for his movies. Now, I'd never jumped off a cliff before, but I drove to Squaw Valley and I had just such a crummy car. I had no heat in the car. It was January. And I drove all night, no sleep. Well, I tried to sleep in the parking lot. I got there at like 4 a.m. and a bunch of famous skiers woke me up at 7 a.m. with a knock on the window. And I jumped out and we had early ups like 7 a.m. to go up the mountain and jump off these cliffs called the Palisades. And Squaw Valley is now called the Palisades. But so I get to the top of this flat top with cliffs below. There's cameramen there. I'd never been film skiing. I've never jumped off a cliff skiing. I'd never thrown a back scratcher, which is what all the guys were doing off the cliffs back then. And these guys were famous. Scott Schmidt wasn't there, but he was part of the team. But the Egan brothers and the Delorier brothers. And I'm like, okay, well, clearly what I need to do to get in this movie is jump off one of these cliffs and throw a back scratcher. So I did 3 of them and I landed them all. And guys had never seen any girl do anything like this before. I had no idea. And then they were loudmouths. So by that afternoon, everyone in Squaw Valley knew my name. By the end of the week, everyone in the ski industry knew my name. And by the end of the month, I was having articles come out in all the major ski magazines calling me the best woman big mountain extreme skier in America because of my ability to jump off these cliffs, which I'd never done before. But like I said, I had no competition. So, and the fact that I landed them and did it as well as the guys, that was really unusual back then.
So you ended up on the U.S. Moguls team, correct?
Yes. So I see my ski career in 2 completely separate categories. So I have the mogul skiing, and then I have the big mountain extreme skiing and the filming. And the mogul skiing is something that I really, I had no training for, except for, the reason why I got into skiing is because you get out of school early in New Hampshire on Wednesdays and free equipment, free lessons. It's like the first one's free. They just try to hook you. Pat's Peak is like this dealer in skiing and just kind of get you hooked. And, but aside from that, I'd never had any formal training. And like I said, just to talk about my mogul skiing career in a separate category is one day I just got really good. Actually, how I got really good is I went to Asia for 4 months to work on my self-esteem, traveled by myself, made myself as ugly as possible because I know that my self-esteem was based on being pretty and because it was also based on being a pretty good skier. I also gave myself the rule during that trip to Asia for 4 months to not talk about skiing. So made myself ugly, didn't talk about skiing and just tried to figure out what else made me me besides those two things and what gave me confidence. And I came back from that trip, hadn't thought about skiing all summer. And next thing you know, I started winning everything. I literally went from last place in mogul competitions to winning everything. I entered to make nationals. How nationals work is you get a chance to try out for the US ski team. And if you beat one of them during that competition, you take their spot. And I didn't beat somebody, but I took 7th place. And there's 6 women on the US team. And then there was an injury with one of the women. And so then I got her spot the next winter. So I literally went from last place to World Cup, skip NORAMs, all of that in 1 year. Without any formal training, competing against girls that had the best training that money can buy, who'd been groomed their whole lives to make the US ski team. It was pretty cool. It's one of the proudest moments of my life, actually. But it was a little overwhelming because I didn't know what to do about the fear in the gate. And I felt like I had imposter syndrome, and I just felt a little over my head. I all of a sudden there's thousands of people screaming and cameras in my face, and I wasn't used to that. And I wasn't prepared emotionally for that. And I did not do well on the US ski team. So I had to make a choice. Like, am I going to do freestyle skiing, mogul skiing, or am I going to do the big mountain extreme skiing? So meanwhile, I was being offered money to go heli skiing in Canada to jump off cliffs into powder. And so for me, the choice was pretty obvious pretty quickly that that's what I wanted to do instead. And that was the end of my mogul skiing days. And I kind of not, I haven't really skied mogul since.
Wow. That's fascinating. And I wonder, because there's such a precision now in moguls, do you think that you could do that today with the same sort of awakening that you had in Asia? Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously the awakening you had in Asia changed you in some way that led you to do this against the precision timing of all your competition, which I just find fascinating.
Moguls are now being made with a snowcat. I believe that's what they use. And they're very symmetrical and perfect. And back when I was on World Cup, they weren't. They were just naturally made. And we would catch air off of the moguls and land in the moguls. There would be no chopped up landings or anything. And so it was definitely, and we're also on skinny skis, So it was definitely wilder, more dangerous, more erratic, not so repetitive. So I guess the question would be, would I be able to do well? I'm not quite sure what the question is, but I'll just answer the question I imagine you asked.
I'm not really sure what the question is at this point either. I guess I'm fascinated by your ability to, not be the best on the mountain, training wise, and obviously completely wipe out the competition and do that because in part of what you experienced on your own in Asia.
I just came back with confidence, self-esteem. And the reason why so right now I run these mindset only ski camps called the Art of Fear Ski Camp. And if somebody were to ask me for a technical tip at the camp, I would tell them, no, I don't do that. You got to hire a ski instructor for that. I'm the poster child for it's all mental. I mean, if you look at my history, just with the mogul skiing, I didn't have any formal technical training, and I went from last place to being on the US ski team. And mind you, I didn't thrive on the US ski team, but I made it on the US ski team. So that's pretty cool. And I did that entirely through just working on my self-esteem. I didn't visualize skiing. I didn't think about skiing that whole summer. All I did was just work on my character and who I am as a person and my confidence as a woman. And that's what actually tipped me over the edge to making the shift from last place to US ski team in one season. So it's interesting, who does that? And could that happen today? Absolutely. People say that sports are 90% mental and the other 10% is mental too. Now, that's not really true. I would actually add that it's also opportunity. I always joke that the best skier in the world is sitting around a dung fire in Africa right now, and they've never seen snow. And they don't know that they could be the best skier. So opportunity, physicality, like your genetics, what kind of body type you have. Do you put on muscle? Well, it definitely pays to be shorter if you're a mogul skier or a big mountain extreme skier. But the mindset is the right relationship with fear. which I kind of had, but once I got in the World Cup gate, I didn't know what to do. And the coaches, they weren't really paying any attention to me because they were just waiting to see if I would be worth their time. But I didn't know what to do about the fear. I was so out of my comfort zone once I was in the World Cup gate. And I didn't thrive because I didn't know how to deal with the fear. I tried to do the things that we're always taught to do, which is put it out of my mind or convince myself that I didn't care, rationalize it away. None of that stuff works. I mean, it might get you through a moment, but it just builds upon itself. And eventually, the truth is going to come out, which is that you're overwhelmed by fear. So I think the reason why I thrived when I was filming movies is because it was just an audience of maybe 5 people. And I really thrived by showing off to those 5 people, especially if they were men, especially if they were cute. and then if there were cameras out. One thing that I really credit my longevity in the sport, because I was considered either the best in America or the best in the world for 12 years, was because I would only take big risks, at least in terms of, we call it mini golf, where you ski short, very intense lines with a lot of airtime. I would only do that stuff if there was a camera rolling, because I always had cameras on me. So there was plenty of time for me to do that. But like if I had skied in Squaw Valley, where there's pressure to ski like that every day, all day, even when there's not a camera rolling, like on a storm day, for example, we don't typically film during storm days. I probably would have broken my body so bad, or probably killed myself 1,000 times over. Like I really saw my big mountain extreme, we don't call it extreme anymore, but we did back then, skiing career as a job. And when I was out there, I was working. And when there wasn't a film camera there, I wasn't working, and I wouldn't do that stuff. I would still ski hard, but to be honest, for like 10 years there, I don't think I skied a single run that wasn't judged, filmed, or photographed. But anyway, it was an interesting time for me, but I definitely saw it as a job. And I was probably the only one in the scene that wasn't partying hard, like drinking a lot of alcohol and staying up all night. Like I really took it seriously, but in the best, most fun possible way at the same time. Like I had a blast during my ski career.
Well, you said a couple things there. First off, we just came out of the Waterville World Cup. And we did a piece going into that with Wayne Wong and Ken Tofari. You know those names, from the original freestyle event at Waterville. They said the same thing about the moguls back then to the moguls today. And that was when you were skiing moguls, of course. But the other thing, the mental part, we had Doug Lewis on as we entered this season about training, and he just drove home the mental part of skiing. Doug's as vibrant as anybody I know with passion about skiing. Burning Man, we had Burning Man. We had the chaos of Burning Man this past year with all the rain. Tell us about your experience there and speaking with the Zen Master.
Okay, the Zen Master is a different conversation. So let's bookmark. Okay. Well, actually, it's the Zen Master comes after Burning Man. So let's start with Burning Man. So 2003, I was fully sponsored, sponsored by Red Bull, Nikon, Ralph Lauren. I had 12 different paint sponsors. I had 4 different, because I was a writer. I had 4 different monthly columns in 4 different ski magazines around the world, which they're really hard to get. It's a monthly column, and they don't give those out freely. I had one in Australia, New Zealand, one in Europe, one in Canada, one in America, skiing magazine. And then I also was hosting a bunch of different television shows. And I go to Burning Man. So I'm at the point basically where I didn't even have to ski anymore. All I had to do is drink a can of Red Bull at a party and I'd get paid. I go to Burning Man. I'm there for 5 days, my first time. And I didn't realize then what I know now, what the shift was, but I'm all about radical self-expression. And that's what Burning Man is about. And I felt like the only place that I could radically express myself was while skiing. And then I was a fear addict. So I was always looking for the sketchiest, radical self-expression stage. That's another story. I've had over 50 near-death experiences. I'm really lucky to be alive. But anyway, so I go to Burning Man and it's radical self-expression. And I realized for the first time in my life that, oh, I don't have to risk my life in order to feel this way. I can just go to Burning Man. And I went home and my boyfriend at the time was freaking out. My parents were freaking out. I'm like, no, I quit. I quit everything. I spent 20 minutes. I wrote a letter to all my sponsors, to the magazines, to the ski industry, basically, and said, I'm just done. I stopped doing the television show. I stopped writing for the magazines, everything. And there was a magazine called, it was an online magazine called Skier's Journal, and they published my letter for about a half an hour, and people were so pissed. I was really surprised to hear that. He never showed me any of the comments, but he had to take the letter down. And I think it was because I really was living the dream that everybody wanted, which is, I'd gotten to the point where if I wanted to go skiing in Sweden, I'd have like 3 different companies fighting for the right to pay me to go. Like I had it all. Like I had, because of my writing style being so funny, and I'm selling the sexy wild side of skiing. I know that Powder Magazine had written an article about me, and they called me the protoplasmic mass of the ski industry and the biggest icon the ski industry never expected. So I really had hit a point in my ski career where I really was epitomizing the dream. And to write that letter and walk away was very offensive to a lot of people. And I don't mean people in the ski industry so much as just skiers in general. I don't think they could understand it. And I never looked back. And like I said, all my friends and family were freaking out, saying, no, you should wait. It's only been 5 days since Burning Man. Like, give it a moment. And I had invested the money that I'd made as a skier in real estate. And so I had money, and I didn't have to worry about that. So I didn't need to rely on my sponsors or continuing to ski professionally. I just realized that I really wanted to do something different with my life that maybe built upon the skiing. Now, I didn't know what that was going to be. But I'm just going to pause here because maybe you have some questions before I start talking about the Zen Master, which came next.
No, please tell me about the Zen Master, because I'm way into it.
I realized that, I'd been the best in the world for 12 years. That's a long reign of terror. And I remember when I was the year before, so it was 2002, I get a phone call from Outside Magazine. So Burning Man was in 2003. So this is the year before. Well, a couple of things happened. First of all, I'd had the worst near-death experience of my life a few years prior. And I'm like, this is crazy. I'm going to die if I keep skiing this kind of terrain and doing the stuff that I'm doing. The second thing that happened is Outside Magazine called me, and they said, hey, we're doing an article about dangerous sports athletes, best in the world, different sports. And we're doing one on who we think is the best woman big mountain extreme skier in the world. I'm like, I'm used to phone calls like this, thinking they're going to write the article about me. And they said, well, we're calling you to let you know that it's not you. First time in 12 years. So we want to interview you and get your reaction to that. And we want to tell you the person that we've chosen and interview you about her. And let me tell you, I was so relieved, because it was just a long time coming and I really wanted to be done, but I didn't feel like I could walk away from the sport until there was somebody that was following me that I admired and respected and thought was going to continue the reign of terror, like I like to call it. So they picked a Swiss woman, Francine Morelon. And I said, oh, absolutely. She's a better skier than me. She's charging so hard. I had actually had the near-death experience I mentioned with her. And anyway, the way she was just so hungry and so charging. And then they interviewed me about her, and I said the only downside about Francine is she'll probably be injured. Probably be severely injured or dead within a year. And that's what happened. She didn't die, but she broke her back because she was really reckless. And you can't be reckless in these sports, not these dangerous sports at this level. And she went to do a backflip in a terrain park off of a jump with a hard pack landing, but she'd never done a backflip before. And if I was going to do a flip, I would train it on a trampoline first, then I would train it on a water ramp into water, and then the first one I would do would be into powder. Like, there's just a whole progression. But Francine decided to just go for it onto hard pack, and she's in her 30s at the time. So she broke her back. She was paralyzed, I think, for 4 days. So thank God she made a full recovery. So she was best in the world, I'd say, for a year. And then there's a whole series of women after that. But so just a whole bunch of things led up to me going to Burning Man and saying, okay, I am just done. And, like I said, I didn't have to continue skiing. I could still stay in the ski industry, and I could probably still make it a living as a professional skier today, and writing for the magazines and hosting television shows and all that. But I really just wanted to walk away and learn what else is going on in the world. Like, some people can eat pizza for lunch their entire lives and they love it. I need to break it up. I need to go have sushi or something, or Thai food, or like, I don't think that I'm the type of person that will want to ski 100 days a year for the rest of my life. And so I actually not only walked away from my ski career, but I stopped skiing almost entirely. I did want to continue getting free skis, though. Like, it's hard to give up the free
Who
stuff.
doesn't? Yeah.
I'm there
hard,
with you.
It's hard to give up the lift tickets. It's hard to, anyway, but I was just tired of being Kristen Ulmer in capital letters. I just wanted to, well, as I like to joke, I realized that the only thing that I'd learned from my ski career is hedonism and the gratification of my massive ego.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to be a little bit more introspective and figure out what I'd learned from the last, well, at that point, 15 years as a professional skier. It's a long time. And so I started these mindset only ski camps called Ski to Live, which is a play on the words live to ski. And I hired a sports psychologist to facilitate them. And I mean, he was a great guy. He was really smart. He had a PhD, but I realized this guy had no clue what made for great athletics. And so the first camp came and went, and then the second one was sold out. And I'm like, I've got to find somebody that's more compelling. So I hired a Zen master who had a history with athletics, but was not a skier. And I learned more. It was a 4-day ski camp. I learned more about myself and what the magic was for me as a professional skier that made me so good in the first 10 minutes of my 4-day ski camp under his leadership than I had in 15 years as a professional athlete. And I'm looking around the room, and I mean, we're 10 minutes into a 4-day ski camp, and the entire room is holding back tears and just like looking shocked because of what they just learned about themselves as well. I'm like, okay, this guy is good. And I studied with him for 15 years. Now I facilitate my own ski camps called the Art of Fear ski camps. They're mindset only. They're really cool. And I'm not a Zen master, but I studied with one for a really long time. And I learned that I had the gift of facilitation, and the camps are probably they're just the proudest thing that I've done to date. They're so good, and they really affect people's, not only their skiing, but their lives. And I've seen people go from being an intermediate skier to being a expert level skier in one run. They're really powerful, and I'm really proud of them.
With that being said, what are your 4 different ways of dealing with that fear? I know you have 4 different ways.
Yes. So most people deal with fear the first way, which is resistance to it. And resistance is a catch-all word to describe any form of trying to meditate it away, let it go, take a pill, drink alcohol. Yes, I put meditation and drinking alcohol in the same category. I mean, meditation is great, but if you're using it to feel better or to have less anxiety, then it's a coping mechanism. And these coping mechanisms regarding fear are these resistance patterns. And it seems like great ways to deal with fear, but really they're ways that we don't deal with fear, or we replace it with calm, or replace it with joy or love or passion. So level 1 is resistance. And almost everybody does this. And if you take a ski school lesson or work with a trainer, they're probably going to teach some form of resistance, rationalizing it away, that sort of thing. So level 2, which is progressive, and you're finding a few people teaching this now, is acceptance of fear. And, as I'm explaining these, imagine fear as a person that's with you while you're skiing. So resistance to this person, the whole reason why you're going skiing is to hang out with this person. That's what makes skiing so interesting, is the fear. And I don't mean scared or afraid. That's not how fear manifests for most people. So level 1, resistance to this person. Level 2, acceptance. Like, okay, I know you're going to be here. It is what it is. Third level, emotions want to be felt. So level 3 is feeling your fear. And when you feel your fear, you're naturally in your body. And that's a better place from which to perform than your head. And then level 4, which is where the magic happens for me and for most people that are the best in the world at their sports, especially if they're dangerous, is they have intimacy with their fear. And the fear is actually the thing that takes them into the flow state, the intimacy with it, that is. And the fear shows up as presence, focus, excitement, aliveness, and is the whole reason why I was a skier in the first place. I loved fear. I loved feeling it. I loved the sensation of that excitement, and the intimacy that I had with it took me into the zone. Stephen Kotler, he wrote a book called Stealing Fire, and he's the reason why everybody's using the word flow as being the optimal high performance state these days. He took Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow and made it more popular and modern today. And he said to me, he's a good friend, he said, when there's fear involved, flow comes for free. And I said, no, that's not true. When there's fear involved and you have intimacy with it, flow comes for free. So those are the 4 levels.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's fascinating. Everything you're talking about is fascinating. In 2017, you released your own book, The Art of Fear. What was the response? And, what went into the studying and the mental sort of adjustment you had to do in your second career, totally focusing on becoming the expert on fear?
What makes me an expert on fear is I'm not repeating anything that I learned in college or psychologists, people that get their PhDs. So this is nothing that you'll find there. Self-help gurus, doctors, scientists, it's great. They've come up with amazing ways to buy us time and limp us through the United States of anxiety, or anxiety disorders, and given us great coping mechanisms to get through a moment or a day. So what I'm doing is kind of teaching the radical opposite of all of those techniques and tools. And how I learned them is when studying with the Zen master, I learned a facilitation tool called voice dialogue. And everything that's in The Art of Fear, the book that I wrote, and everything that I teach about fear and the 4 levels and all that, this is not my personal philosophy. I've actually spoken to the voice of fear through voice dialogue with, tens of thousands of clients at this point. And I just ask fear, like, hey, why are you acting so crazy? Why are you showing up as an anxiety disorder? What's going on? And basically what fear has told me through my clients is what I teach. And I show the clients, like right now, yes, I have these mindset only ski camps, but I also work with people as a Zen therapist to help them with anxiety disorders. And all I do is facilitate a conversation between them and their fear. And then whatever fear says or whatever fear asks what to do, or ask the client what to do about it, is what the client does. And then these anxiety disorders resolve very quickly. So what I'm trying to say is that none of this that I teach or what's in the book is my personal philosophy. It all comes from talking to fear.
I think you just brought it up, a question I wanted to ask off the cuff there about the United States of anxiety. And we talk about fear and anxiety and, a level of confidence. And you look at this year that we're in now in 2024, and we don't really know what's going to happen politically. We don't know what's going to happen, across the board on a lot of different things. How do you sort of, I don't want to say take advantage, but how do you sort of how do you spread the message, right? How do you spread the message of how to deal with fear? Like, what do you do in your life that helps, people deal with fear, or even just how to address it?
Anxiety to boot.
I mean, it's obviously mental health is something that is everywhere a problem. And, I think the ability to address it in certain situations helps tremendously. And I just wonder, like, how can you bring your expertise on fear to a nation that, is probably going to be pretty fearful this year and going further?
Let me start by saying that anxiety is fear.
Right.
We just don't call it fear anymore because fear has such a stigma attached to it.
Trust me, I am anxiety ridden as there are, and I know it's fear. Right? I've come obviously to address it as fear, and knowing what it is, and knowing what it is in my family, right, and recognizing it as fear in those little pockets. Now that I know what it is in me, has helped me. So it's like that awareness of that is step one.
Yes, calling it fear and being more real, raw, and honest about what it is definitely helpful. So let me just back up at the beginning. I'll try to make this as succinct and clear as possible. Here's exactly what causes anxiety and what causes an anxiety disorder in crystal clear terms. So we have this amygdala, and all data is run through this primary filter first. And we're talking 11 million bits of data per second. And it's not a thought producing part of the brain. It's an emotion producing. It's the manufacturing plant for fear. And if there's a threat, it'll send a shot of discomfort called fear into our bodies. And it's supposed to flow like water through a hose, providing us on point, intuitive, physical reaction without thought. And then after the threat is gone, so too is the fear after about 10 or 90 seconds. Now, when I say fear, I don't mean scared or afraid. It very rarely manifests as scared or afraid. It's just any kind of discomfort in our bodies, like that's our fear. So what happens is, because we fear shame each other, fear is just, an embarrassment. Dad says there's nothing to be afraid of when we're younger, even though there is. Like, none of us are in flow with our fear anymore the way nature intended. Instead, what we do is we hide it. We're embarrassed about it. We try to conquer and overcome it. We fight it. We run away from it. This is an interesting point for skiers. Fear does not hold anybody back from doing anything on the mountain. We get that wrong. It's our unwillingness to feel the fear that holds us back. So nobody knows how to deal with the fear, and we're all just running away from it, fighting it, freezing in the face of it. The fear does not make us freeze. It's our reaction to the fear that makes us freeze. So we can call it kinking the hose. We kink the hose, we stop the flow of the fear, we try to get rid of it. Next thing you know, the fear builds up in our system and starts to flood into maybe our chest or our throats, or if we live in our heads, it'll flood into our heads, kind of like trap water tends to do. It has to go somewhere. And next thing you know, it's looping fearful thoughts or anxiety. So trapped fear behind a kinked hose is actually anxiety. Now, if you keep this up over time, or if you kink the hose on like a class 6 rapid of fear during a trauma or something, or after a trauma, you will wind up with an anxiety disorder where you have perpetually trapped fear now exploding out the cracks in the form of a panic attack, or just being in your head is OCD, just repeating itself over and over again that you continue to try to control. It's like all of this can just be very simply explained is that none of us are in flow with fear. And so the solution to all these anxiety disorders, or anxiety itself, is to do the exact opposite of what we're taught to do, which is unkink the hose, get back in flow with fear the way nature intended. And how you do that is you turn towards the fear that's maybe keeping you up in the middle of the night, or that's chattering away in your head, and you learn how to feel it, which is level 3. And then if you can have intimacy with it, then it shifts from being a holdback into actually the greatest experience we have here on planet Earth, taking you into a flow state, for example, while skiing. So our relationship with fear is so crucially important. It's the most important relationship that we have in our lives. And I like to see fear as a person, because it lives in your body, and with it you share a heartbeat. And if you're fighting with it, you're fighting with yourself, you're fighting with the nature of life itself. And you're kind of missing the whole point of why we're skiing in the first place, which is we're here to challenge ourselves. Well, with challenge comes fear. So if we learn how to be in flow with the fear again, then not only does it not hold us back, but we're actually able to expand who we are and get better and better, and actually have this amazing dance with fear out there in the mountains. So it's not only resolves anxiety disorders, but resolves fear issues in skiing. But then all of a sudden, fear becomes our greatest asset and ally out there in the mountain. And that's the secret that I realized that I had that made me the best in the world for so long in my incredibly dangerous and difficult sport. It wasn't the radical denial of fear. It was actually the radical hunger for, willingness to feel in intimacy with fear that made me so good.
Let me ask you this. In this day and age of big mountain skiers, we'll throw in big mountain bike riders at the Red Bull Rampage, and so on. Are any of these athletes coming to you? People are pushing the realm almost to the dangerous level. You know, McConkey really pushed it, but now it just seems like it is happening more and more in the big mountain situations, hucking off cliffs, thinking you can do anything. Are any of these athletes talking to you at all?
I love that you asked that question. First of all, let me talk about Shane McConkey. I used to date him, actually. He's a really good friend of mine. And if he were alive today, he would say, yeah, intimacy with fear. That's the secret. How do I know this? Because I've seen an interview where he said that. Right. And, but nobody's talking about this. No. And probably the reason why, well, I mean, how much time do you have? Like, I interviewed with Red Bull to be their mindset sports coach. They're like, when can you start? And then they ghosted me, which is funny because I used to be sponsored by them. You know, the thing is, the predominant attitude on mindset sports coaching is the level 1 resistance to fear, blocking it out, rationalizing it away, calming exercises, breathing exercises. So I interviewed 26 different world-class athletes in dangerous sports, climbing, base jumping, that sort of thing. Out of those 26, only 3 of them knew about the secret, which is the intimacy with fear. And that was Laird Hamilton, Will Gadd, ice climber, Jeremy Jones, snowboarder. They all said, yep, intimacy with fear, before I even brought it up. I'm like, wow, okay. Now they're the best in the world at their sports. So the other 23 athletes that I interviewed, 20 of them just said, because I would ask, what's your relationship with fear? 20 of them just started saying, you know, traditional things. Oh, I don't let it get the better of me. I release it. You know, I believe in myself and I calm myself. You know, basically level 1 resistance, coping mechanisms. And I find that the best in the world have intimacy with fear, and then number 2, number 3, number 4 on down have resistance to fear. I mean, there's basically 2 ways to get to fearlessness: radical inclusion of fear or radical denial. And what happens is, over time, I see this with ski racers in particular, they just start getting injured time and time again once they hit about age 30, because they're so rigid to block out the fear. You know, there's just consequences for blocking out the fear, including losing your connection to your intuition. And so that makes it super dangerous. And so 20 of them would just give pat answers, like I basically resistance answers. But then I shared my information with them, and 20 of them nodded their heads. Oh my gosh, that's it. So hard. I thought they were going to break their necks. And they realized that they actually, what they say they do versus what they actually do is very different. And then the remaining 3 people of the 26 were so adamantly in denial of having any fear whatsoever that I thought they were going to punch me in the face. One of them like stormed out of the interview, and I'm like kind and gentle. I'm like, well, what do you think about this? What you have is intimacy with fear. No, I don't have any fear. And like pulled the microphone off, walked out of the room. Another person, I thought they were going to punch me for even suggesting they had fear, and started to, on camera, cry a little bit at the mere thought. I mean, it's wild once you start to dissect people's relationship with fear in these sports. Right. They don't know what they're doing. They're the poster children for what to do about fear, and they don't know what to doing. As for whether they're coming to me to work with me, a little bit. I'm a little lazy. I'm not very good at marketing. And to be honest, I would absolutely, I've worked with several athletes, and the transformation is instantaneous. So I hope more people call me, but right now I'm mostly focused on helping people with anxiety disorders and not helping people be better athletes, except for through my ski camps and occasional private clients.
Sure.
Wow. I could have this conversation for hours, but we're up against it. I do have to ask you that you've traveled the world. You've had the world's finest cuisine. Where does the Pat's Peak cookie rank?
Oh, I would say I had chocolate malt pudding at Ruth's Diner in Salt Lake City. I would say the chocolate malt pudding and the cookie, favorite desserts in the world of all times. I mean, if you're like listening from Tokyo, like you got to fly to Pat's Peak for the cookie. There's some skiing there too, but yeah, the cookie, they're so good. I don't know I think they put cocaine in them. I don't know what they do there. Like there's something about those cookies that are dangerous.
Well, I've got one last question for you. When are you coming back to Pat's Peak?
Well, my mother just died.
I'm sorry. Our condolences.
Yeah. And so I would always go back to visit my brother and my mother. And I was doing these, their Women's Only Wednesday facilitation camps. But now that my family is not going to be so rooted in Henniker anymore, I don't know when I'm coming back. But I look for every opportunity. My brother still lives in Henniker, and the next time I visit him, I'll just make sure that I visited in winter, and then I'll go skiing at Pat's Peak with the ladies again.
Perfect.
Sounds like a deal. Kristen Ulmer, thank you for joining us on the Basecamp podcast. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.
We will be right back after this. This is the year to visit the Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. With over 450 inches of annual snowfall, 4,000 vertical feet of continuous fall line skiing, a world-renowned ski school, and terrain for everyone, the Jackson Hole Mountain Resort is perfect for your next ski trip with friends or family. Off the slopes, Jackson Hole offers adventure and relaxation. Visit Yellowstone or Grand Teton National Parks. See elk, moose, and bison roaming in their natural habitats, or relax in a hot spring or at a spa. No more excuses. This is the year to go visit Jackson Hole. Go to jacksonhole.com for more information.
Hestra knows hands. For over 80 years, Hestra has been producing the highest quality, warmest gloves you can own. Crafted with durable, form-fitting leathers, they are made with the end user in mind. Don't let cold hands end a great day of skiing or snowboarding early. With hundreds of different options, you'll find a Hestra glove that fits your needs. Check out Hestra Gloves at hestragloves.com. That's HESTRAGLOVES.com. Or at your local ski shop or wherever Hestra Gloves are sold. Hestra Gloves, taking care of your hands since 1936.
Eric, it just amazes me. We just had Kristen Ulmer on, and I just think of all the great big mountain skiers that have come out of New England, from the Egans to the Deloriers to the Noel Lyons to Kim Reichhelm to, the list just goes on, and it just amazes me that they're all coming out of here.
Yeah, I mean, Pat's Peak. Do you think that Pat's Peak can produce world-class skiers? Well, obviously, yes, it can, because it has. And Kristen Ulmer is I think she's such a fascinating person to talk with, particularly in a sport where fear is part of the game. right? Like, who was it who told us recently, if you're not, fear keeps you alive on the mountain, right? And if you're not, it's like I tell my kids, if you're not falling, you're not trying. And they kind of make fun of me for doing that, but it's really true. I mean, if you're not facing the fear and you're not facing what it is that's holding you back, then what kind of progress are you making?
Yeah, exactly. I think one thing that really sat with me at the end of that interview was the anxiety part. Because honestly, not until that moment had I equated anxiety with fear. But she's right. And I think what Kristen is doing right now with her book, with her camps, she's not worried about making you a better skier. She's worried about making you a better person with dealing with what's inside all of us.
I mean, this is it's maybe not the perfect example, but there was this quarterback, played for the Patriots about 20 years ago, Tom Brady. And I don't know if you recognize this story, but he was the 199th pick in the draft, in the NFL draft. 199th. And he was a bench player, and he went on to win 6 Super Bowls as a starter in the NFL. Now, Tom Brady was not the most talented player, obviously, but he had a mental sort of capacity to him that faced fear, I think, in a lot of ways, right? And that took those negative aspects that were going against him, and he, had such strong mental capacity that he was able to turn those criticisms into a reason to perform and to drive him into his career. I know that's a much different example than what we're talking about with Kristen, but it does go to show you that for all the and we talk about with what Kristen did on the World Cup circuit, or the U.S. ski team, and how she was attacking moguls and not even having any real training, but it was her awakening in sort of Asia that kind of led her there. I think that we are more and more now addressing the mental side of things, right? But I think we're only just really tapped into just how much of our mental, I keep using the word capacity, it's not the word I'm using the word, but how much of our mental stamina is in sport that we're just beginning to realize now. I think it's even more than we've kind of hit on this very level.
Oh, yes. I look back to the first time I met Doug Coombs, and, his ability to compartmentalize. He was a great athlete, but he was more a great mental player. And I think all of this, everything Kristen is talking about, isn't about being an athlete. It's about the mental maturity to be able to compartmentalize, which I love that word, each piece of the pie. I've been up at, on the head wall at Tuckerman's with Pucker Factor. I've been on shoots out west with Pucker Factor, but being able to absorb that fear and realize that it's real and you can use it to your benefit if you so desire.
It's fascinating. I can't wait to dive into her book and learn a little bit more about myself, really. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Mike, thank you very much. Another great episode. Hope you, by the next time we see each other, you've been out on the hill.
I'm going to be out on the hill, and you're going to have those heated socks.
Yes, more on that in a bit. Thank you very much. For Mike Specian, I'm Eric Wilbur, editor of the New England Ski Journal. This was the Basecamp Podcast, presented by Country Ski and Sport. We will see you next time.
New England Ski Journal's Basecamp is a Seamans Media podcast. Seamans Media. Inspiring, informative, insightful.